Most people would be like, what are you doing? Oh my gosh, man, are you crazy? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. I've done this before. And like I said, it's worked out great and it's held up, no problems for years and years. And so I'm not worried about it, y'all, because it works out. It'll all come together, trust me. This is how to not tile a floor. There's probably 50 million videos out there on YouTube, wherever, showing you how to lay tile. Hey y'all, I wanted to talk to y'all today about the tiling. I wanted to show you because that whenever I first went to tile, my first tile job in our house, that first thing I did was burn up a brand new drill. And they're not cheap, y'all. I didn't realize, because thin set, grout both use very little water compared to how much powder there is. So after that, I went into my kitchen drawer and got a big slotted spoon. So I just used the slotted spoon. I'm not mixing a whole bag at one time. The good thing about being able to mix it up a little batch at a time is because you can just mix up however much you need instead of that whole bag. This is the computer room. It's going to be kind of like a little bit of echo in here because the room is mostly empty. I like to cut it to fit before I actually do the thin set. And how I've got it laid out, I just did it on what I call on the thirds, and I'll explain that, okay? And the easiest way for me to do that, and you'll hear the noise because I'm walking on tile that's not actually in place yet, and it's going to be kind of hard to see because this tile, as you can see, the design makes it look like it's like extra pieces of wood that are just pieced together. And so you got a lot of changes in the design on the tiles themselves. But if you start, let me see, this would be the easiest spot right here for me to show y'all what I mean by on the thirds. And you see I'm like tossing debris off. Once I get this all cut to fit, then I'll come back and you see I still got the old floor in here and other stuff. Anyway, let me get back to explaining what I was talking about on the thirds. I actually took, and I didn't actually measure, I just kind of eyeballed it. This is like a third of a tile from here to the wall, okay? And the next tile is actually 2/3 of a tile. And then the next tile is a whole piece. So you can see how it kind of stair steps, okay? And it goes from that short piece to the next one will be a full piece, okay? And then you'll come back to the stair step 2/3, and then the next one will be stair step with the third. And then you go back to a full piece again. That's all you do. It's just a repeat, the whole floor. I'm gonna forewarn you because this is a process. With me coming into the room, this is the absolute worst way I could have had to done this room, because I can't physically do the whole room in one whack anyway. So I break it down into pieces. Okay, here you can see I've got this space between where the tile's going to end in the wall. That gives me some room to play with when it comes to me putting my spacers in here to put the tile down. But whatever, there's not going to be a gap left. Once the trim goes down, it's going to be all covered up anyway. You just need to make sure that you have plenty of space where you're not going to be butting up against the wood that's up underneath that wall holding the wall in place. See your wood down there on your wall? That 2x4 that's on the floor, that's under your wall right there? You want to make sure that your tiles are not butted up against that wood between that wall, and then you'll have your tile laid down and your spacers, and then you'll come over here. You want to make sure that you're not against that wood that's under that wall, because that wood, as your temperature changes, will swell and shrink and swell and shrink. And over time, if it's swelling and shrinking, if it was to swell enough, then it would actually cause enough pressure on a tile that it would actually cause it to crack and break. I don't want to get in a position where I have my thin set mixed up and then have to stop and cut tiles, because your thin set will dry out and They say to only mix up what you can use in like an hour's time. And so I won't mix a whole bag at one time anymore. And I'm going to show y'all cutting a tile, I guess. So I think I'm just going to pause this right here, and then I'll just go cut the tile real quick and show y'all. The shading on this with the sun, it's in the afternoon, so the sun's kind of coming over, and the post has kind of got the shade going there. But I'm just going to show y'all. Just flip it on, and you'll see some water coming out of it, and that's what it's supposed to do. Okay, I'm going to turn this off just so I can show y'all something. You can tell that blade is dull. Did you see the way it was breaking? The pieces were breaking off. That'll happen sometimes anyway when you're cutting just a thin slice off. I've learned, you know, from the times I've done this. But if your blade is dull, it takes twice as long to cut, and it's more likely to break off in pieces like that. And you probably seen a little bit of the spark there. It's to the point where I kind of need to rinse this out. The powder from the tile is starting to kind of build up down in there next to that blade. And since it's plugged in, I'm not putting my finger down there. But anyway, you can see that even though, I'll bring it in here in the sun so y'all can see it. Even though that blade's dull, I need to sharpen it, but you see how it kind of like chipped away on that edge? But even still, it's still straight enough cut that, you know, by the time I put that up against the wall, and then it's going to have the trim going down over it, nobody's ever going to see that little bit of chipped edge from my dull blade anyway. And this is the water basin, which it's getting, you got to watch these little saws, because especially as your blade gets dull and it produces more of that powder, it will actually start building up on the bottom down in there. You see that? And that is like, it gets like super thick and like almost wants to like set up like powder, like concrete or something. And so your water gets too murky with that, and you're definitely going to notice that you're having more trouble getting through your pieces. I just wanted to show y'all basically cutting the tile and give you a word of advice on if you was to take on something like this, to make sure that you're emptying and rinsing out your water, that your blade, it keeps your blade cool. And once it starts gunking up, it makes it even harder for that blade to work. And so that's why you've seen the little bit of sparks there at the end of that cut. So plus, it, because the way it was breaking off, I don't know if y'all can see that, but I can see it. It's got just a little bit of a dip right here where it kind of comes out a little bit. It was like break it off, and where it broke off right there, I just kind of like run it back across that blade to kind of smooth it out a little bit. I could smooth it out a little bit more, but like I said, it's going to be hidden anyway, so it doesn't matter. My piece is cut, lined up here, ready to do at least most of the room on this side. With the big desk in here, we almost broke it getting in here, so we know we'd be breaking it getting it out. So my plan is I'm going to go ahead and tile all the way to here, about the middle of the room, and then we'll pull that out and we'll move it over there. I mean, I've kind of done it in pieces before, and that was the only way I could really get it done. So here I am back at it. Got my trusty knee pads on, since we're starting right here. And I had done vacuum this room and had to re-vacuum it. I got my trowel. And since I'm doing a small amount in the 5-gallon bucket, I always use my spoon to just spoon out what I need. I got it cut where I'm just doing one row at a time, just back and forth. And then that way, it's just easier for me to get it done. Having to do it in pieces the way I have to do. And you can see I'm trying to keep from getting a lot of excess out of the line of where the tile is going to go, since I'm doing one row at a time. Probably not going to record this whole process because of the time it takes, because it is time consuming. What these little grooves do that the trowel causes, it ends up causing like a vacuum. And over the years, especially with these tiles, I don't even back butter. You know, I don't take the tile and add more on the back of here because it just always made it too much. So I don't do it. And I'll get it pretty much in place before I put my spacers. Come get this off. I probably should get a wet towel for that. I like these thinner tiles, and so I don't use these big spacers. I use these little tiny ones because I don't want big grout lines. So push it against those. You want to put at least 2 on each side. The short side and the long side. There we go. And then I'll just use my finger to come back and take the excess from here, because I don't want it causing it to dry and be there before I get to this next row. And I can tell you, even with the knee pads, this still wear on you. You don't want your thin set clogging up your grout lines. I'm going to go ahead and grout most of what I have. I've got over half the room laid, so I'm going to grout at least half the room. So anyway, you have to make it like really thick. It needs to be super, super thick, which is very hard to do by hand. So if you got a whole lot of tiling to do and you know you're going to be needing a big old nice expensive grill anyway, I would suggest getting one and getting some kind of attachment to be able to mix this, because I'll tell you what, this has been like the most dreadful part, one of the most dreadful parts about doing tile is having to mix this stuff up. So the grout, now it dries really quick. It sets up pretty quick and everything too. So, and I also use this in the grout. Now I can't tell you if that makes any difference or not, but I use it when I mix the grout. I used it in our bedroom, I've used it in the guest room, and so far, I mean, we've had dogs have accidents and get sick or whatever, and we go to clean it up off the tile, and you can't even tell, which with these little grout lines, you can't really tell hardly anything anyway. So, there's a couple things I wanted to point out, honestly. Originally in this room, I was going to lay the tiles going this direction, and so I cleared out this whole side of the room, okay, and I wanted to start in my doorways was the whole thing. I wanted to get my doorways situated. It's backwards, but like I said, that's me. I'm backwards, apparently, on a lot of things. I don't know. I just do the best I can, and most of the time it turns out pretty good. So I'm going to get my Hoover floor mat in here, and I'm going to get this up. That is the plaster from whenever they originally were in the house, making the house and putting the texture on the walls, and that's just the residue that fell on the floor. With it being the concrete, I just take the Hoover floor mat that we have, and that's what I use to clean the floor, including this, all right? And so it got up, because I had scrub brushes on it, plus with hot water and a little bit of cleaning solution, it gets most of this up. Now, the reason I'm going over this is if you're just coming in, you're doing your house and you're just coming in and putting laminate or vinyl flooring down, that's not as big of a deal, because both of those instances you're going to have that underlayment. Otherwise, you're going to run into the problem like we did with this vinyl plank flooring that I didn't think you had to have a underlayment for. I thought it was like part of it. My mistake. And so it ended up mildewing and molding up underneath that stuff. I kept getting sick with sinus stuff. It was that mildew and mold. I kept smelling it in there, and I kept mopping and couldn't figure out where was that smell coming from. So this was the very last piece of that the vinyl plank floor. The ceramic tile lasts forever typically, so I should never have to worry about it again. But this is definitely a how not to tile your floor, because you see what I've done here. Here's my door, okay? Now, the reason why I went ahead and decided instead of running the tiles this direction, I went this way with them. Right here, there's a little bit of a notch, okay? When I did that, I didn't make it perfectly straight across because I figured it didn't matter. I'm going to put a transition piece across the doorways. I still got to put one over there. Still got to put one by the master bedroom too. I figured I might as well wait and do them all three at the same time. So that's what we're going to do. Personally, I kind of think that was a mistake, because the doorway for the guest bedroom, it's like all straight and flush, and it's nice, and the transition piece is just basically going to be covering up the seam. It's just basically going to make it, transition from one floor design to another, okay? Transition piece. So the only bad thing about it is because it's going to be sticking up. So anytime you clean the floor, vacuum with the floor cleaner, the floor mat, it's not going to clean around that so well. So I'm really kind of like thinking, I'm just not even going to put the transition piece there for as long as we're here, because I really don't care. And I would rather not have to worry about cleaning around it. So I may just leave it like it is. So that's when I decided to change the layout of the tile in this room. I decided instead I would just go ahead and I would work my way coming into the room. It's better for me not to try to do like the whole floor in one day, because it just takes so much out of me. I mean, it takes me hours just to lay 5 or 6 rows of this. And so it's better for me to go ahead and just spend a couple hours and lay 5 or 6 rows, go ahead and work my way into the room. And then that way it's enough space that I can just step across what I've laid. I've already grouted this side even, okay? Like I said, this is an instructional of how not to lay tile. Okay? This is how you don't lay it. This is like the way, this shows you why they tell you to do it the other way. Because the other way would have been me starting over there. That was my main thing I wanted to say, was just basically, you know, this is the reason why. Coming into the room, laying the tile with no other escape. This is why they tell you, figure out your layout, okay, ahead of time. You know, if you take little steps, eventually you do get where you're going. It just takes a long time. And especially if you have multiple projects that you're taking these multiple steps doing. And most especially if you're having to redo jobs, or if you're doing jobs in a wrong way and basically closing yourself in. And then I've got this all vacuumed and everything and ready. And I've already got 4 rows right here cut to fit. I've got my thin set and my bucket with my trowel sitting there, and my spacer's just waiting for this. I've just been waiting for help to get that thing moved over because I couldn't do it. So I'm gonna get that cleaned, let it dry, and then I'll be able to lay these other rows. Because if I can go 4 or 5 rows and be able to step across to leave the room, and then come in tomorrow and do another 4 or 5 rows, step across, and then I'll be down to my last couple rows. It has to set up, or you're gonna mess it up trying to walk across it when it's first laid. That thin set has to dry. With all the time, trouble, and expense of doing this, you don't want to cause an issue just because you didn't clean your floor. Last time was a bit thin, so I've got it thicker this time. A little bit harder for it to fall off the spoon. So, I want it good and thick. Okay, I've got my last pieces cut to fit. I've got them stacked here in the order that they go. It's like 4 rows. That last row I had to cut about maybe ½ an inch off the edge of the tile lengthwise. Once that's done, then all I have to do is wait till the next day and be able to go ahead and mix my grout up, the rest of the grout, and go ahead and grout the rest of the room. I've already done half of it. So it's not going to be hard to finish the other half. And then I've got a sealer that I've never tried before that I'm going to use on this floor. This tile is so dusty. So that's where I'm at, the last little bit of this, and I'll show y'all when it's all said and done. All cut to fit and in place. Only thing left to do is to grout. Now I could have left this and not grouted this until I got ready to grout the whole room, but y'all, that's a hard job. But down on your hands and knees, and you're having to use your arms, you gotta have a lot of core strength, and I don't have it. So anyway, getting the grout in the grooves and crosshatch. I'll try to get record a little bit of that for y'all, just to kind of show y'all what I'm talking about. But this, like I said, is not a how-to. This is a how not to. This has definitely been a tile job of how not to do a tile job. So, y'all have a good one.